Could I ask the panel members for this final session to take their places on the stage, please? Members of the panel for this final session, please take your places on the stage. Thank you.
Peter.
Honor also. He's sitting next to me.
Oh, come back.
Oh, we can watch ourselves in the mirror.
Oh, that's a big mirror, right?
Oops. Hey, this is on.
What do I get? Not saying anything.
Pani हाल्नु पर्यो है हाल्नु
Never. आरामै हालु.
ठिकै छ डेडलाइनहरु भएर दौड कति बस्ने
म अस्ति भइ 3 हप्ता भइसक्यो हुम्ला गरे क्या हुम्ला
ए त्यही सुबिनाहरुसँग हो क्या
सुबिनाहरु चाहिँ ओभरल्याप भयो ओभरल्याप चाहिँ भयो थियो we went to Limi Valley. Have you traveled in there?
I've been to Simikot and I've traveled east from there but not to Limi.
It was fascinating. For 15 days we walked around 3,800 meter elevation. One night we even slept in a cave. It was used by 11th century, one of the old Rinpoches to meditate. So it was kind of a... Yes. No, I need to make sure 2055. Okay, that's what that means.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our final session for today, which is a dialogue cafe style session called Connecting the Dots, Translating Science to Policy Through Effective Communication. And I'd like to immediately hand over to your moderator for this session. This is Anna Solgaard, who is a communication specialist for Grid Arundel. So over to Anna. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. So welcome to this session on connecting the dots. We are really excited about having this mega dialogue cafe with you today. Most of you had the experience yesterday. It was a dialogue cafe. Today it's the same but different. It is about communicating science and policy and, in short, connecting the dots. Before we start, I want to introduce our panel, which is our keynote is Ashok Gurung, Funding Senior Director at the India-China Institute, Professor of Practice in the Julian Day Studley Graduate Program in International Affairs at the New School. As a speaker, we have Kunda Dixit, Chief Editor, Nepali Times, Rucha Gate, Senior Governance Specialist from ICIMOD, and Mona Lako, apologies from the pronunciation if it's wrong, Country Director for Nepal BBC Media Action, Batu Krishna Upreti, expert member of the Climate Change Council, and Trude Rauken, researcher at Cicero in Norway. So now I would like to call upon the session host, Anja Rasmussen, who's a Senior Manager of Knowledge Management at, and Communications at ICIMOD. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Anna. I would also like to extend a very warm welcome to everybody to this last session of the day. It's a little bit special having this very big dialogue cafe forum, and I'm really happy to see so many people actually have chosen to show up. We will have to be quite precise and keep the time. I know a lot of you have signed up to go to Patent Square, so we will have to be finishing exactly at 5 o'clock. But as I said, I would really like to welcome everybody to this, what I hope is going to be a both innovative and inspiring dialogue forum. ICIMOD is a knowledge organization, and as such, what we call two-way communication, addressing different audiences in a right way, and knowledge sharing is very much at the core of our work. So this session makes me very happy and also in a way very proud that it's possible to get so many people in here to discuss how we connect the dots. It might be a little, for some, a strange way of actually naming a panel discussions, but we find that connecting the dots, this way of interaction between scientists, between journalists, between media people, and between the general public is very important to have a discussion of. The aim of the plenary session is all about exploring the challenges of rewriting, of translation, and also of repackaging science for policy influencing. It's for how do we build bridges, how do we build trust relationships between the different actors in this process. How do we work with researchers, with politicians? How do we work with journalists? And how do we work with the normal people? Is the way that we communicate using media actually the right way of communication? Or do we need to find other ways to create an influential policy that moves things, that change things, that not only for the scientist, closer to this, yes, that for the scientist seems to be so a normal way of communicating. How do we actually change that way? So for us today, I'm happy to have a very good and representative panels. And I think that all of them are giving 3 minutes to come up with a nice statement. But before that, I would like to give the floor to our keynote speaker, Ashok Gurung, that I'm sure will give us a very inspirational talk.
Namaste and good afternoon. Can you hear me at the back? Great. First, I want to thank ICIMOD for inviting me to this timely, important deliberation. I'm grateful to the organizers who have worked hard and thoughtfully in creating a great space for all of us to engage with many stimulating conversations, both in and outside of the formal conference sessions. I want you to know that I'm neither an expert on science, communications, climate change, or policymaking. I'm based at the New School in New York City, a university well known for its critical social science research, and I have been working on several collaborative initiatives in India and China, including Himalayas, for many years. For this session on connecting the dots, translating science to policy through effective communication, we're really here to consider a problem. How to address the gap between science and the public, and between scientific knowledge and data that can inform and shape policymaking. Here I want to suggest this may be a bit narrow of a question, and that we need to rethink and broaden the questions about science, policy, and the public. Let me give you 2 examples to suggest why we might need to reframe this question. First, there has been a lot of discussion about the current IPCC report, including focus on Himalaya. Anyone who is familiar with the previous IPCC reports, especially the summary reports for policymakers, would agree that these documents do a pretty good job of clearly and simply stating the science, the uncertainty, and the range of options on climate change. If this is true, then perhaps the problem is not that climate science is unclear or hard to understand, but is something else. Especially when you consider that most key decision makers and leaders have access to qualified people who can help them understand the details of climate change research. So as people involved in improving how science is communicated to the public and policymakers, we first need to understand if the problem is how scientific knowledge and scientific findings are communicated. This brings me to my second example about reframing how we connect the dots. As I said before, I work in a university setting and have young kids of my own, which provide me opportunities for frequent interactions with young learners. A majority of these young people intuitively understand some of the basics of climate change. In fact, just last month, I participated in the largest climate march in history, and it was led by young people concerned about their future. If you listen to them closely on climate change, you will find the second reframing of this question of science and policymaking is really about power and politics. If we assume for a moment that science is or can be communicated to both the public and policymakers, then we must ask, what other obstacles or dots are we missing when we talk about science communication? Even when there is broad public support for climate science, as there is in much of the world, translating this scientific knowledge into action is repeatedly blocked by deeply entrenched interests, especially those multinational corporations and politicians whose greed and power require that we keep burning fossil fuels, continue cutting down forests, continue to build more dams, and continue to privatize our natural and cultural resources for sale in global markets. This is a different problem than communicating the science. Because of the increased number of climate-related crises, there is a growing media attention on climate change, but too often, these discussions happen after the fact and disappear just as quickly. However, through these events, I believe people know that the climate change is happening. Through these events, we know now, right? What we're talking about here is how to have policymakers and leaders pay closer attention to what science tells us and then make hard decisions on the use of resources such as oil, coal, water, and forests. The need is how to use communication effectively to create sustained engagement and action, both from leaders and public. One more minute. It is here I would make my final point, that we need to think beyond science and beyond the human-nature nexus. This requires more creative ways to engage policymakers and the public. As we know, climate change also involves questions of ethics and values that go beyond science. This is where a deeper engagement with the arts and the humanities would not only add a new dimension to how we talk about climate change, but would also offer other ways to better understand and act on scientific knowledge. For example, this past Saturday, the India-China Institute, in partnership with the artists collective known as LASNA and the City Museum here in Kathmandu, hosted a roundtable discussion on climate change with nearly 24 artists, writers, poets, and a 24-hour performance with internationally recognized Nepali artist Ashmina Ranjit. You can see a photo from this performance, and I'm happy to ask Ashmina, who happens to be here, to please stand for her bold and inspiring performance and commitment to help us think and rethink why climate change matters. In a nutshell, what we really need to be thinking about is how to redraw our climate communication map. Maps that take these political, social, and cultural obstacles into account. Thank you.
Call upon the next speaker, Kunda Dixit.
Thank you. As a journalist with a science background, I've grappled with what Ashok has just been talking about, which is how to communicate science. Now, you have a very complicated scientific concept. You need to communicate that to a public as well as policymakers so that it'll lead to better governance. That's what we need to do. Now, the problem with it is that, especially when it comes to climate science, it is an extremely complex issue. It's not just meteorology, it's also biology, it's sociology, it's everything mixed up. And everything about climate science goes against how politics and media function. So you have a very complicated and complex science, which politicians and media will not grasp because of their short attention spans. You need responses that are still subject to debate, and there's uncertainty. Politicians and media hate uncertainty. You're talking about long-term impact, and both, as we know, politicians are short-term thinkers, and media also likes to delve in deadlines, which is short-term. And then the global effects and the international action that is needed are both too large for politicians who are governed by the law that all politics is local, and media for whom the perimeter of interest is right within the country or within the community. So it's long-term and it's also global. So, which is why it becomes so difficult for media and politicians to act on this. Climate change is also allowing national governments off the hook, because everything can be blamed on climate change, and climate change can also be used as an excuse for inaction. So climate change just adds to existing structural problems of inequality, poverty, overconsumption, and environmental degradation. The answers to climate change are structural within and between countries. And I think we have to reframe the debate if we are to go from awareness generation, which is what the media does, to behavior change in the public and policymakers, by turning the debate away from saving the planet to saving money. It's all about the wallet, and individually, within the community and nationally, we really have to show that being efficient about energy use will save us money, will save our economies. And if we reframe that, then it becomes more immediate and more national. Thank you.
So in short, you said it's about reframing from use of from saving the planet to saving money. That's a provocation. So to our next speaker now, Rusha Gate.
Thank you. So picking up from my previous speaker, what I would like to say at the outset is we need to differentiate between scientific knowledge, which is meant for policy change, and that which is not meant for policy change. I'm sure we all are aware of some knowledge product, some kind of research, which may not have immediate use, but it may require some time, some more analysis to be put to use. So we should all realize that everything is not meant for policy. The second issue is that policy change is a very difficult thing. So we cannot expect that there will be a major policy change coming out of just one research or a group of researchers making some recommendations. because policy could be depending on so many other considerations which are not really scientific. And therefore communication becomes all the more important, because for whatever research where it's being done for some practical issues, where some change in policy is possibly going to make some change to lives of so many people, it is a very good idea to involve policymaker at the outset. This has been tried by many researchers these days, that we try to find what are the requirements, what do policy makers really want to know, where do they want to impact change, and if we can bring these two things together, then it is really easy to communicate with the results of the scientific knowledge, and also there is more acceptability to it. But it is more important for us to know who are these policy makers. Are these politicians? Are these ministers? Are these bureaucrats? Once we know who these are, then again it makes easy for us to communicate. Another thing is that there are, in most of the cases, in most of the governments, they have their own think tanks. They also have specialized institutes that advise them on policy changes. Will it be a good idea to communicate with them? Is it easier if we approach them? Keeping this in mind, the question that I wish to put today is, creators of scientific knowledge need to find right fora and targets to impact policy. What could be those? I expect that we will be sitting around a table and having a dialogue on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Richa. So you said what do policymakers need, and who are the policymakers, and how do we engage them from an earlier point? Now, thank you. And to Mona, yeah, thank you.
It's Lotso.
Thank you.
Difficult Hungarian name. So we're talking quite a bit about communication in this past 2-3 days. I heard quite a bit about communication gaps, knowledge overload, information overload, getting to the right people at the right time. And that's what we are in the business of doing at BBC Media Action. 3 years ago, we actually embarked on a major project called Climate Asia, where we looked at people's perceptions about climate change. We didn't ask them what do they know the term climate change. We just talked to them about what they thought was happening around them. We talked to about 33,000 people in 7 countries, including Nepal, Bangladesh, China, India, Indonesia, Pakistan, and Vietnam. And we really wanted to ensure that what we learned from this project is how to actually provide communication support so people on the ground can adapt to climate change. I'm not going to talk too much about the data in the study, because you have our booth outside and you can actually experience and earn some chocolates if you get the perceptions right. But since the study, we have learned a lot more. And there's a lot more need to be done by all of us to actually get to the people. And you know, the slogans everywhere say people adapting to change. So how are they going to do it? And how does communication play a role in it? We definitely feel that the conversation has to shift. It has to shift to actually root in whatever people's need on the ground. Some of the key points for us is the use of language needs to change. It needs to be so that people understand what we're talking about and it's meaningful for them. When you talk of climate, it's difficult to understand. When you talk about food, water, and other resources, livelihoods, people actually understand more. Do not talk too much about scientific and technical abstractions. Talk about the real problems people face and the solution to those. Keep it simple. Science sometimes is scary, although we're all trying to make it a lot more approachable to all. Also understand what people need. Not everybody needs the same thing. It's not one size fits all. The communication channels need to be quite well understood. The audiences need to be understood. Their channel of getting the information needs to be understood. Someone might appeal much more to a drama program about the changes and how to adapt to that. Others might benefit much more from face-to-face interaction. we need to pay attention to those differences. And don't overlook the potential of media. And I'm not just talking about training a bunch of journalists about what does climate change mean, but actually fully understanding the potential of media, being social, broadcast, print, traditional, and so on, and using and recognizing that we're trying to reach millions and not an allied 1,000. So my last point is that successful communication strategies will be those that seriously and constructively consider, engaged, and empower audiences. Audiences will be the key. And the questions I would like to discuss is how do we actually bring the communication needs of ordinary people to the forefront of the climate change conversation?
Thank you for a very concise question. I will come up on the board later. So you talked about the need for understanding the potential of media, and also how do we involve the audiences. Thank you. Now to Batu Krisha Upriti.
Thank you very much. I'm not a communicator. I have used information that has been published. So I think the information for will be different for different stakeholders. I recall when I was involved in developing Nepal's climate change policy, the information that has been shared, that has been published, and that has been understood at the policy making level, it's quite different, and it was really difficult to understand the scientific information. In this background, what I think is, what are the science-based key messages? Sometimes I used to feel that informations are shared which are perception-based and the understanding-based, particularly on climate change. Whether it is science-based or social science-based, I was confused in when I was in the government. So how we can repackage the scientific information in a simple and easily understandable manner, it's a key. And for these institutions involved in generating knowledge and information may wish to meet the scientists or meet the press program regularly to inform the communicators as well. And that is very important if we want to translate our scientific findings into practice. We need to make 2 + 2 5. How we can make it? That will build the confidence of the policy makers. It means if the information that has been shared or published can be used, that will make 2 + 2 5. This is my understanding. And if not, that will create another problem. So sometimes we need information on theme-based, ecosystem-based, or evidence-based information is much more valuable. So I would encourage to organize orientation, particularly to the media, to enhance their capacity. And some media people may also be, as Kundaji has indicated, science background, if we want to communicate scientific information. Again, document science-based, location and region-specific or theme-based, and specific information and the stories by the journalist. And then if we can communicate them, that might be good. The another problem I have noticed, is to organize the orientation program to the media houses and the chief editors who really provide space. Even if the communicators are good, and if there is some editing, that might give different message. And you need to select the means for effective communication to the politician, to the to the farmers, to the climate change negotiator. Thank you for that. The important thing is, how we can make climate communication sustainable, and it is somewhat projectized. It is necessary to make it sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So you emphasized the importance again of audience awareness and also engaging the media. And I'm very curious about the 2 + 2 = 5, which that's a great one for the table. We now go to Trude Rauken from.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you to my fellow panelists for interesting insights. So as an adaptation governance researcher, part of my work focuses on uptake of knowledge among decision makers, trying to understand the drivers and why these drivers are important. Because it can seem like a mystery that some scientific knowledge achieves a breakthrough, while this is not the case for others. We have had this idea that if the knowledge is of high enough quality and we have a good communication strategy, it will succeed in reaching decision making. Well, as we all know, this is not the case. There is no linear relationship between knowledge and action. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't be sitting here, right? So if scientists want their exceptional findings to be read by others than 5 of their colleagues, they must understand the context that they are targeting, and in addition, they need to have the right timing and framing. To be able to do this, scientists must be in much closer dialogue with decision makers, because through dialogue, it is possible to have knowledge exchange. Because scientific knowledge is not the only valid currency here, and dialogue ensures co-production of knowledge. This is crucial if science is to be a part of the solution for adaptation challenges. Your relevance as a scientist is as much dependent on your presence as on your findings. In other words, the researcher is just as important as the research when it comes to communicating the findings. Through presence at different arenas, scientists can understand the context, frame their findings to fit with this context, and to do so at the right time. Still, there is no knowledge exchange without friction. And as the keynote in the first plenary said yesterday, this is a painful process. And this we all have to accept, expect, and handle. To all my fellow researchers, remember and accept that once you put your findings out there, you lose control over how they are used. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't publish them, but you need to make sure that you control how you reach your own results. The issues and processes that I've been talking about are not only found in the crossfire between science and decision makers, but rather found everywhere where so-called expert knowledge is applied. Thus, I think it would be useful to have a broad discussion around some of the tables on the following. What is the role of science in society, and what should be its role? Thank you.
Thank you, Trude. So one point I heard very clearly was about science communication being a co-production of knowledge. And soon we'll see your questions as well. Thank you to everyone. We are now going to, just 1 second. I need to move here because I want to show you the questions we now have. So we're going to, as we had yesterday, we will now divide the room, try to cluster you in different tables. So the first row is for question 1, so you can all read that. So make sure you, and the second row is for question 2, and so on. So I'd like to ask you now to rearrange yourself or be aware of what you're going to talk about at which row. And if you're very happy where you are, then you sit. This is very good. And soon a table host will come to your table, and we can start fleshing out these questions. Anyone wants to move? Mm-hmm. Okay. 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 So the three last rows, if you don't have a sign, a number on the table, please make sure you move to a place where there's a number, because there will only be table hosts where there are a sign, a number. So if you're sitting on the chairs in the very back, please find a chair. Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. So please move to a table with a number as soon as very swiftly. If you're missing chairs, we can move those around too. We also want to see if we can cluster around, so at least we have 2 groups per question, so that we don't have groups that only have 2, 3 participants. So if you can make sure we fill the tables. So if you're sitting alone at the table, even if it has a number, but if you're only the only person at the table, please move to a table where there are people. So there are number and there are people. So there are two indicators for what we need for a table discussion. So the dialogues will go on until 5 minutes, just after 4:30. So you have until 4:30, about approximately 4:30 for table discussions. Then we will ask for a 1-minute elevator pitch from the rapporteur from your table. So there will be a 1-minute reporting back from each table after that.
If I have your attention for 1 moment, ladies and gentlemen, I'll just explain to you exactly what is needed. You have until 4:30 to produce some sort of graphic on that piece of flip chart paper and a 1-minute elevator pitch statement based on the question that you are dealing with. So you have until 4:30 to produce a graphic and a 1-minute statement. Thank you.
So you now have 5 more minutes to conclude your dialogue, if you can conclude it. And in the reporting back, there will be 1 elevator pitch per table. So only 1 elevator pitch per table, and you need to select who's going to give that pitch from your table. Yeah. The elevator pitch is for 1 minute. So it's good to have a clear idea what you want to say. So now there is no more time. But before you, so it's now time to hear from you. But And it's going to be the same as yesterday, but before we get to that, and Miriam will again introduce, and Andrew will introduce the clues of how the signs, I want to ask everyone to stand up. So can everyone stand up for a little bit, not long. Because you've been sitting now for an hour, so it's time to see. So as you know, this session is about connecting the dots, and you've just connected the dots. Time to start. Also, you in the back, I'm sure I can see you from here. So stand up.
Everybody up!
Okay, we're going to do a little trick, very quick. Now, at your table, no one's looking at you, no one at all, I'm blindfolded. You're going to see, how can you make a statue, a sculpture of connecting the dots at your table? What does it look like, what you've actually talked about now? So, how can you, with your bodies together, so Miriam and I are somehow going to connect the dots here. I'm not sure what dots we're looking at, because we haven't actually been talking, so we need to... But, and Andrew, okay. Very dramatic. We have yeah. So you may have less dramatic connecting dots on your table, but you now have 15 seconds to connect the dots with your hands and legs. Okay, great. So
This table has connected the dots.
yeah.
Can we see some more? Our table at the back has connected the dots.
And everyone, all the way at the back are connected. Oh, even at the front. We're missing. Yay! Okay, applause for everyone. So we go straight to now the clues. I hand over.
Okay, so once again, the same format as yesterday. Anna will be coming to your tables with a microphone, and we will be in charge of the timing. Just to remind you, this is Miriam, if we could have your bell, please. Miriam will demonstrate the signal for 15 seconds remaining. And now Miriam will demonstrate the signal for your time is up. Great. So, if we could begin with the table that was addressing question 1. How do we talk about power and politics in translating scientific knowledge into policy? So if we could have the presentation from table 1, please.
Thanks. So we basically boiled this down to 3 major points, which you can see here. First one being politicians are stubborn. How do we get them to hear the science? So this means, how do we get scientists on committees, involved more directly in policy, and making scientific information more accessible? The second major one is, who controls the production of knowledge? So how does funding bias what gets produced? Do local knowledge production that scientists do actually reflect the reality on the ground, or do they just meet what the government wants certain policies to claim they meet? And also on that one, how do we make reports accessible so that not just summary reports, but technical reports are understandable within ministries, within individual experts in countries? And then finally, we need to think critically about the history of power relationships. So how has the history of colonialism, of imperialism, impacted countries' abilities to adapt to climate change, fund responses to climate change, and how do you address that in a system where the very powers that created these economic inequalities are the same people providing money supposedly for solutions? So we need to be thinking about these different questions, science, power, and politics together.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, if we could move on to table 2, who are addressing the question, what are the links between science, communicating the science for policy response, and governance? So over to table 2.
Okay, we also boiled down to 3 points, and 3 things will link science, communication to policymakers, and governance. One is the methodologies to conduct research itself, a balance between quantitative and qualitative methods, which means communicating voices of people as well and integrating them into research methodologies, which would be more convincing for policymakers. And then we will be correctly informing policymakers, making research more correct so that the ultimate result in governance is effective. The second is institutions. The institutional link is very important, and one of the participants indicated that in several countries there are several ministries and departments who work in silos and there's no collaboration. So how to make a focal institution which takes responsibility, otherwise responsibilities are difficult to fix. The third is collaboration, working together, having dialogues, and also role of applied science in this connection, of course. It could be departments working together, but also science, different departments, extension workers, farmers, communities, private sectors working together. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to table 3, of which I believe there are 2, and they are addressing the question, developers of scientific knowledge need to find the right fora or targets to impact policy. What might those fora or targets be? So, handing over to table 3, your time starts now.
All right, thank you very much. We had a really lively discussion. Maybe you can spin this around this way a little bit. And we came up with maybe 3 or 4 main points as well. The first one is that scientists need to have a better understanding of policy processes in general. And that is not something that scientists maybe have naturally as part of their day-to-day work habits. But one of the good suggestions that came out was to create an inventory of policies that you ultimately want to affect, and make sure that you're targeting the right people who can have influence over those policies. So if you're working on climate adaptation, it's not necessarily the case that you need to go to the Ministry of Environment, but perhaps the policy itself is much more suited to an infrastructure ministry or a finance ministry or something else. So doing the homework and making sure that you understand the policy processes. And then ultimately targeting the right people within those ministries. And one good suggestion that came out was finding the influencer of the influencer, in a way, the person who can influence the ministry or the person in charge of making a decision. What else? Then, for those of us who are doing work in other countries where we're not physically based, an important thing was to make sure that we use local partners to translate the message abroad in that other country. And then the last thing is that these are all new roles for scientists. As I mentioned at the beginning, these are all things that are now becoming a new part of the whole landscape of doing scientific work, influencing policies and communications and all the things we've been talking about. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So moving on to table 3.2, addressing the same question. Over to you.
The question was, developers of scientific knowledge need to find the right fora, targets to impact policy. What may those be? There is an infographic here that shows that it is in fact a relationship between different actors and forums. But if we were to prioritize, then we thought making scientific knowledge accessible through mass media would be a big thing. Getting NGOs involved in normalizing information from scientific community into the more ground level community would be more impactful. Think tanks occupy a big position, as we were informed by one of our fellows who was part of the Planning Commission, saying that often the government infrastructure doesn't have people who can absorb the details of scientific knowledge, so if you can have think tanks make that more accessible, it might help. Given the diversity of communities that exist in our landscapes, opinion makers of different positions of power would be helpful. And even the scientific community is not a homogeneous group, so if we can identify which knowledge goes through which medium of communication, that might help. And of course, the Planning Commission would be a big one. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Moving on now to table 4, who we're dealing with question 4. How do we bring the communication needs of ordinary people to the forefront of the climate change conversation? So over to you.
Thank you. We had very interesting discussions on this, and we agreed on 4 major points. There must be a two-way communication, that is the top-down and the bottom-up approach. And the modern approaches like mass media and social media, including infographics, must be clubbed with tradition methods such as communication like plays and social gathering. And also there must be, we should institutionalize some agency to play the role of intermediaries of communication between community scientists and policymakers. And the last point is the scientists should also know what kind of information is required for the community, and also disseminate these in a manner which is useful for people at the grassroots level. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We are delighted to have 3 table 5s, and all 3 of them will be addressing the question, is it necessary to make climate change adaptation communications a mission? So, moving to table 5.1, the floor is yours.
Okay, I'm honored to give a presentation on behalf of the table. The answer to this discussion question is yes, definitely. However, we are not very clear about the definition of the commission and also how to make the commission. But we did figure out what kind of commission is the best commission from our group. So this kind of commission should be first sustainable, second understandable, third accessible, fourth concrete, and the fifth is relatable, either through art, like some cartoon to make people understandable, and also through economical value and to make it attractive. And the third is through issue related. And the final one, this commission must be evidence-based. And also this is a kind of a leading question. Maybe we can't give the very good answer. So open the floor for discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Moving on then to the next table 5, who are addressing the same question. The floor is yours.
Well, the group 5-2 discussed about the necessity and the need for making climate change adaptation communications in a mission mode. The group discussed and found that yes, there is a gap in knowledge sharing from global to regional to national and to community level, and so is the case back from community to the global level. But this this climate change adaptation communication as a separate mission perhaps is not very much justified if we club it with knowledge management, as in the case of India, like there are 8 missions, and if this communication mission is clubbed with that, then perhaps it will be more justified.
Thank you very much indeed. And finally, table 5, well not finally, but finally for the 5s, table 5.3.
Okay, question number 5 was with table 5.3, and the question was such that we, first of all, the group deliberated and we could not understand what the mission stands for. And when we understood what is mission, only 4 minutes were left. So the question was designed as such that we had to say either yes or no. But the question was such that we could not say no, it was only yes. So we quickly came up with one statement. The statement reads as, the group deliberated on question number 5 and collectively agreed that communication for climate change adaptation is of prime importance for all the stakeholders, which include the tiers from the top to the bottom. That is the policymakers down to the communities, the people who matter. and why? To propel action directed towards enhanced knowledge of climate change adaptation, which is geared towards plans and actions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So moving on to our final three tables, all of them table 6, and all of them addressing the question, what is the role of science in society, and what should be its role? So over to the first of the table 6s.
Well, we had a very lively discussion about science and its relevance in society, but we were able to agree on that science should diagnose, find evidence, and produce possible solutions for climate change adaptation issues. But this is not a process that can happen in isolation, but in dialogue with stakeholders, as this process will lead to accessible and useful knowledge for those it is concerned with. At the same time, scientists cannot be everywhere producing knowledge together with stakeholders, so we also think that we need good knowledge brokers that have the legitimacy and access and can access different users of knowledge. And these are both educational institutions, the media, extension departments, social mobilizers, NGOs, and think tanks. And perhaps they can help us overcome these problems with frictions that we have between traditional and scientific knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Calling now on table 6.2 to give their response to the same question.
We had a very stimulating discussion. So we identified the 3 key stakeholders in the society. They're the scientists, the policymakers, and the community. And we identified the key to the scientist community is the neutrality. It is our role to serve as a bridge and provide neutral view and perspective to serve the community and to provide those results to policymakers to make a policy accordingly and therefore go back to serve the community as well. And the key words in our discussion is objective and subjective. So the role of scientists that in reality we discuss is now that scientists are subjective to the policy makers and objective to the community, which is influenced by the economic and political power. In other words, if we want to see how things work, we track the money. So how the role actually should be is that scientists should be objective to the community, to serve the community, and to be subjective to the community, to serve them and work from their perspective, and be objective to the policymaker and only tell the truth. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, the last of the table 6s, the floor is yours.
We discussed about the present role of the science and what could be done in the future. So science has definitely made our life more comfortable by inventing many things. So science also has helped us to understand many natural processes which are going around us. And science has caused empowerment in the society by giving various knowledge, skills. And science also have saved us from many accidents since we know the natural processes going on. So currently many scientific researchers have some ambiguity in their outputs, so this can cause loss of faith in the people into science. And currently the researches going on in science are more driven by the donors, which should not be like that, and the researches should be simple, relevant, practical solutions, and that are more action-oriented. And in the future, we can increase the participation and dialogue of the communities. Then like some scientific innovations that can cause hazards to the people, like construction of dam can cause landslide or explosion of nuclear power plants. So we can minimize these hazards in the future and we should improve empowerment. We should cause empowerment also to the marginalized group and create sustainable solutions to the society. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is amazing. We have a lot of material, and I think we could have gone on talking for another 4 days, but we're not going to. So I'm now going to hand over the podium to the session host and our keynote speaker.
Yes, Ashok, please welcome to the podium as well. We have only 3 minutes to sum up before we have to send you all out for a night walk in Patan. But I have to say that, as Anne said, this was amazing, clear, and understandable solution that comes up. I will not try to sum up all of the different table solutions. You can probably read a lot of the statements tomorrow in tomorrow's brief. So please wait on to that. But there were a few issues here that come up that somehow is behind all of all of the table's solutions and comments. The fact that we need to communicate, I think, is one of the red threads and one of the dots we need to connect. The way we do it is still, in a way, both uncertain but also understandable. We have different way of doing it. We have different groups who have different solutions. But I think we all agree that we need to get an understanding of why it is so important to continue communicating, especially around the climate change. And how we reach the politician is still, in many ways, in many different ways and shapes and form. We all know that reading articles might only increase your knowledge with 10%. Talking to people increases it a lot more. And what I feel and hear is that we need a lot more dialogue ongoing. We need a lot more talk. We might not need so many high-level public publications. We need the science, we need the evidence as a background material. But we really need, and that's what I hear coming from all of you, we need to change it. We need to repackage it. We need to make another understanding of all these high-level scientific reports and make them appropriate to different kind of audiences. Ashok, do you have any comments as well?
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, the only thing I would add is really, as we move forward, let's think of ways, let's come up with ideas where we can turn, this cafe dialogue to chairperson dialogue. Okay, if we can do that, so where, you can envision communities in small tea shops, around, the Himalayan, whether it's over butter tea or whether it's sweet tea or, salt tea, we are talking about these. I think that would be a dream come true. So I think that's when you know that the politicians have to listen to ordinary people. Thank you.
Okay, and then let me just add on to your tea. The iced tea that was mentioned Sunday should actually maybe be a very important part of how we communicate. I hope all of you remember the statements around why we need ice and why we need tea and why we need to combine them. We are almost finished, so I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank all of you, our keynote speaker for a very inspiring first speak, the panelists for also being so different and understanding and giving really strong messages out, and to all of you for being engaged. I was not part of any of the discussions, but when you walk around the room, you can feel the energy, the heat, the understanding, and also the consensus. So thank you for all for making this such a really wonderful experience. Before I leave, we will leave the floor to David Moulton.
Okay, so just before I let David announce the winners of the marketplace and poster competitions, I have a couple of brief announcements. Firstly, can you please leave those flip chart pages that you produced on your tables, and someone from the communications team will come and collect them when you have left the room. Secondly, I have a brief announcement for 4 people. For Sujata Bhattacharya, Amrita Mukherjee, Kausar Adi Uddin Maroof, and Jørn Christiansen, please can you contact the Secretariat immediately after this session finishes. And finally, Mr. Deepak Rijal has lost his glasses. They were left in the back of this room at some point. They are black in color, well, the frame is black, and if you found them, could you please leave them at the information desk where Mr. Rijal can pick them up. So, now I'd like to hand over to David to announce the winners of the Marketplace and Poster competition.
Okay, thank you all for that fantastic last session of the day about communication. So I have the last communication task, which is actually fairly easy and very joyous, in fact. So this is about the poster presentations. I believe we had 20 posters, is that right, out there? And we have 5 winners that we'd like to announce. The criteria for judging the posters were on first, content, second, presentation, third, scalability or replicability, and fourth, innovation. By the way, we had 4 judges, and those were TV Padma, Mohammed Ismail, Deoraj Gurung, and Rucha Gatti. And I want to give a special thanks to Bhavana Shangdan. You have to stand up, Bhavana. Thanks a lot for coordinating these efforts. By the way, I think we'll hear more, but so many of the staff have done a wonderful job coordinating this entire effort on that. But right now, I'll just thank Bhavana. Now, we'll have a more formal awards session tomorrow. So I'm just going to ask the people to stand up. Tomorrow we'll do something where you come forward to get the awards. But I'd like to thank all the poster presenters. And now, if I can have some drum roll somewhere, Andrew. Yes, 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 yes. Okay, the selected presenters were number 1. This is in no order. I will tell you the number 1 winner at the very end. Nazmun Nahermita from Bangladesh. It's one of the winners. You can just, come right, that's good. Right up here, right here is good. Because tomorrow we'll do more for you, okay? And U Shao U, and apologies for that pronunciation. Nice, okay, there she is. From China, Anika Asim from Pakistan. Anika, I don't see you. Is she here? Is he here? Anika? I didn't see. Anyway, maybe we'll see tomorrow. Sujata Bhattacharya. Is she here? No? Okay. And Dili Bhattarai from Nepal. Okay. So actually, what was wonderful about that is the judges did everything independently, right? They put in their marks independently, and the 5 winners were from 5 different countries. Wonderful. In the other part, there were 4 women out of the 5, 4 out of 5. So we have, I never can figure it out. We have about 70% men in the audience, 30% women, but how the women are taking home the prizes at the moment. So congratulations to all. Actually, the winners who are here, can I see you for a minute after this? Thank you all for a wonderful day. Do you have anything else, Andrew? Okay.
So, one final announcement. I'm sure you're all looking forward to the Kathmandu by night walk. We previously said that the buses would go at 5:15. Well, the good news is you've got 10 extra minutes, and the buses will be going at 5:25 from the hotel car park. So please make sure you're there to catch the bus by 5:25. I can see that Miriam wants to say one more thing. So Miriam.
And the buses to the hotels, if you have chosen not to go on the Kathmandu by night, buses to the hotels will leave 5 or 10 minutes later. So that will be around 5:35. Buses back to the hotels, 5:35. And have a very nice evening.